Hey everyone, I'm joined again by Scott Wasson. This is our third and probably final video that we're shooting during his visit. Scott brought this along with him when he flew out here. So Scott, what is this?
This is a Sapphire Nitro RX 580 8 GB video card. So it's kind of one of the faster 580s that you'll find out in the wild.
Yeah, and it's also brand new, as you may have noticed. 500 series.
Yes. Yes.
Before that, this coverage is brought to you by the Computex Conference, which runs from May 30th to June 3rd in Taipei, Taiwan this year. Computex is the biggest event of the year for PC hardware and technology, where we preview the newest prototypes before they come to market. We highly recommend attending or following this event online. For industry professionals and enthusiasts, learn more at the link in the description below. So the plan here is, I'm going to be tearing this down. We're going to look at, just from here, I can see some really interesting features of the cooling solution. So we're going to look at that, and I'll talk with Scott to go through the basics of the card, maybe some other stuff, perhaps Radeon Chill or something like that. So I'll get started on this. Scott, what are the basics on the RX 580 versus something like the 480? Can you get everyone up to speed on that?
Sure. The 500 series is what we're calling it is Polaris Evolved. So you're familiar with the 400 series and our Polaris GPUs. The 500 series offers an expanded range of products. We actually have new silicon going down into well below $99. So we're updating that low-end segment where, you know, a lot of times you'd see older GPUs in the past with a new chip that has all of the Polaris display blocks,
right,
HEVC decode and HDR support and all of that. And then every price point along the way, we're offering more value than we have in the past. And then at the high end with the 580, we have higher performance, obviously. And then we also have allowed our partners, including Sapphire with this Nitro Plus, to really push on performance beyond where they were able to do in the past.
So is that a focus more on the board partners this time around, it sounds like?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So what you'll see is instead of built by AMD boards, you'll see a lot of partner boards. You'll see more variety in the designs, and this is a really nice example of what those guys have been able to do.
Right. So basics here for people who have been watching this so far. Interestingly, all of these screws for the backplate thus far, one, they're pretty big screws, but two, they're also the spring retained screws, which we normally only see for the cold plate and the cooler itself. So that's different. Things are a bit loose now, so we can start kind of pulling it apart. I'm going to remove this I/O panel or plate, and then it looks like from there, it'll be a matter of disconnecting the cables, and then our PCB and cooler should be free from the shroud. So in terms of clocks, it sounds like you're saying the 500 series is going to be at a boosted clock to the 400 series, right?
Yes.
And was it 1340? Is that the new?
Yeah, 1341 or 1340, now I'm forgetting, but one of the two.
Right.
Versus 1266 for the 480. And then on this particular product, I believe the boost clock is 1411.
Right. And that, from memory, 1340 is right around where we were hitting with our original RX 480 overclock, which I would assume, given equal drivers and things like that, 1340 on an RX 480 and 1340 on an RX 580 should be about the same performance.
Yeah,
right?
but that's the new starting point, right?
Right, that's
so
the new
that's the
starting
thing to
point.
think about, right?
Yeah, so now you've got more headroom to actually go up beyond that.
Another thing we're doing with the 500 series is we've tuned for idle and video playback and multi-monitor scenarios. So
Okay.
you'll see lower power use in those cases compared to the 400 series.
Gotcha. So what about, so on the power use side, we were talking about Radeon Chill earlier. That impacts power use as well, right?
Yes.
So what are, let's go over some of the basics on that, just because I know Radeon Chill was a big part of your slides for this launch.
Yeah, so Radeon Chill is a new software feature that we introduced actually late last year. But it really, I think, hasn't gotten the attention it deserves because it's a really interesting option for gamers. Power consumption and noise and heat production is a big part of dealing with the PC. And Radeon Chill is a software method of actually just providing a similar experience, right? But be doing it much more efficiently.
Right, right.
And so the way that Chill does that is it looks at, for certain types of games, that use a lot of specific types of inputs like first-person shooters, third-person games, we know that if you hit WASD or move the mouse, there's going to be movement on the screen, right?
Right.
And so what Chill does is it will limit your frame rate when there's not as much movement on the screen, and then instantly raise it back up when there is more movement.
Right.
And in both cases, make sure that you don't go into those 300 frames per second sort of head cases where you're using a lot of power and you're running well ahead of like even the monitor's display capability.
Yeah, there's no real point in doing that.
Right.
The frame rate's not going to affect your experience.
And so Chill has the ability, I know people don't like to think about limiting their performance, but it actually gives you the ability on a per game basis to go in and tune the thresholds that you choose.
Right.
So that the idea is that at the end of the day, you shouldn't perceive a difference between chill and not chill operation.
Sure.
But you should see the card hopefully running quieter, running cooler, and less power consumption happening.
Right. And chill is something I want to benchmark now that we've kind of gone over some of the basics, particularly on the input latency stuff, which we have your marketing slides, but we'll look into testing in the future for that. For what we've got so far, so I've torn down, most of the card. The backplate can still come off. Got a couple things to do there. But before taking the rest of it apart, what we're seeing here is one of the biggest aluminum heat sinks I've ever seen on a video card. It is full coverage, so we're going all the way across here with some really interesting depth profiles on the fins. And part of that is to accommodate just the cooler, which I don't have the calipers with me, but that looks to be about 90 to 100 millimeter fan size. So dual blowers or dual axial fans blowing down on the card. The VRM as usual is here. We'll look at that in a moment. The GPU's over here. And then the interesting part that prompted this is if you look at this giant plate at the bottom here, this, from what we're seeing so far, is actually contacting the VRAM in addition to the GPU. So that means that manufacturers are finally starting to really get the hint there that they can do a lot more with their coolers. We saw this with the water-cooled Gigabyte 1080 cards. So they're contacting the VRAM, and as I was talking with Scott about this earlier, this means that you might have a higher GPU temperature if you're just measuring in GPU Z or something, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because now we're syncing the VRAM as well. Syncing all these different components with the GPU means your temperature is going to look higher, but you're cooling other stuff as well. So an extra 3C on the GPU in favor of cooling VRAM directly for once is not necessarily a bad loss. So we can pull apart the rest of this now. And then Scott, in terms of other 500 series stuff, that's interesting. What do we have for like the 570 cards? What are the specs there?
So the 570 is 32 compute units on a Polaris 20 chip, so a few of them are disabled compared to the 580.
Sure.
But it still has a nice high clock, and I think you'll see performance that is very nice, actually, maybe not even dissimilar to the original 480 4K cards.
Okay.
Right? But you guys can test that yourselves.
Right. So your lineup, at least for today, 580s, 570s, just to get, I know the answer to this, but just to ask it so that people don't kill me in the comments. Do we have a price yet?
So
I suppose when this goes live, we might have a price.
I was going to say, by the time this goes live, we will have a price to all of this stuff. But as we film, we probably aren't supposed to disclose that yet. That's sensitive competitive information.
Right.
So we can revisit this, or you guys can put it in.
It'll be in the description or something. Yeah. So here's what we've got here. First of all, this came off easier than I thought. We've got some breathing room for the GPU in the back. This is a job well done by Sapphire. Some of the companies don't do this. They'll cover it up and then they don't put any direct contact, which we've previously looked at, between the backplate and the PCB. When they don't do this, what happens is you end up with effectively a hot box from the backplate, just trapping all the heat. Sapphire is allowing some breathing room here. We'll test how effective this is if we get a Sapphire model. I've got some Asus and Gigabyte ones though. And then here we have a thermal pad contacting this protrusion in the plate, and we are working with some kind of metal here. And that is actually screwed in, which we can see here. I'm not going to bother undoing those. So that's interesting. I'm not quite sure why they've done it that way, but maybe it was just cheaper from the die casting process. So that's what we have there. I've just taken out the 4 screws, which are spring retained as well for the GPU. That's what those look like. And that will release the massive aluminum heatsink in theory from the PCB. I'm just make sure we didn't miss a screw somewhere. But it looks like we got all of them. So let's see how this goes. Oh, there's a toggle up here too. So they've got a dip switch at the top, which looks like, I suppose you don't know the specifics on this card. Looks like
usually
a BIOS toggle.
it's a BIOS toggle, right? And
right.
You could have it as a backup in case you flash your BIOS, or in some cases it's in overclock mode. You can flip that to go into a default higher clock mode.
Right.
I'm not sure what Sapphire has done with the toggle.
Yeah, it looks like potentially a BIOS switch. So you've got, I think it's just held on by basically glue at this point. Yeah, thermal pads and thermal paste. All right, here it goes. Scare you?
GPU didn't come off. I thought it, maybe it would.
Never know, yeah. All right, so pretty cool stuff. Yeah, we'll have to have BuildZoid analyze the VRM of this. But what we're looking at here is we've got the memory, so 2, 4, 6, 8 gigabytes. So 8 gigabit packages or 1 gigabyte packages. GPU is in the center, and thermal pad contact from the VRAM to the giant sink. And so what we've got here is actually a bit different than what I thought. It is an isolated copper cold plate, and then it looks like maybe just an aluminum, which is fine, honestly. For the rest of this, the curious thing is, does isolating this help in a significant way and isolating the GPU from some of the heat on the VRAM? And my guess would be yes, because there's a couple layers of difference there. So that's the collective cold plate for the VRAM and the GPU. Really interesting fin design that we'll have to talk to Sapphire about to see why they did it this way. They've got all the channels in here, so you can see there are thermal pads contacting the FETs, and I'm not seeing doublers or anything like that, but I am seeing 2 sets of 3 FETs. We'll talk to BuildZoid to analyze the phase design, and then a channel here for the capacitor bank and for the inductors, which we've got the same amount of inductors there. So it looks like a good couple phases for the core VRM. In terms of the FET models, we're gonna have to, I'll pass the numbers along to BuildZoid again, because he's got all these in his head. So yeah, that's the board. Let's is it okay if I guess we might as well clean off the GPU at this point, because
do what you need to do.
Have to reapply thermal paste anyway. And do you know, is the GPU identifier different on these, like the name on it?
The name on it? Well, let's take a look and see what this one says.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out. Start here. Is it blank? Oh, it's blank. Which might just be if it's a pre-production model, it might just be blank because of that. But
yeah, this is a early card board that I just brought along to illustrate. I didn't know it was going to get this kind of treatment. Happy to do it, but
we're taking good care of it. Yeah, so no name on this particular GPU, but once we look at the review units, that might change if this is being an early sample. Memory, all that stuff. Memory, power design, phase layout. We'll have in a separate video with BuildZoid's professional overclocking analysis. He can also talk about power mods, shunt mods, hard mods to get more power out of the card. And I think that's pretty much what we have to look at right now for the Sapphire, Nitro Plus?
Yep.
Nitro Plus RX 580. And other than this, I guess, Scott, anything you want to throw in here in terms of the Radeon 500 series? Or I know everyone's going to ask about Vega in the comments.
Yes.
There is information on Vega out there. We've talked about in the past architecture at CES.
Yes.
So that stuff hasn't changed.
Right.
And just to clarify, there's nothing new that you can talk about.
Not right now.
Okay.
Did you guys see our GDC capsaicin info. We actually showed some nice demos there of Vega working with the Rapid Pack Math capability. That's a nice thing. So there's some new information since CES.
Right.
But we're setting the table with the 500 series for the Vega release. We said it's coming, but it's not yet time.
Right. Yeah. And what about for the 500 series? What are the GPU? So we had Polaris 10 and 11 previously. What are the new ones called?
So 20 and 21.
20 and 21.
Plus there's at the low end, the RX 550 is a new GPU whose name will remain shrouded in mystery for today.
Right.
But is actually another Polaris chip that's even smaller than the Polaris 21.
And Polaris 20 is going to be the one on the 580s, I guess?
Yes.
Okay. And then 21 is on the 460 or
560.
Yeah. Cool. Well, there you have it. So there's the PCB. Check back for BuildZoid's analysis. We'll have full reviews if they're not online today with embargo lift. This was obviously recorded ahead of launch, but if they're not online today, they'll be online shortly. And Scott, thank you for allowing me to take apart the card.
Definitely, no problem, man.
We'll get it back together, and we'll see you all next time.